Is it working? Okay, hello, Mr. Ambassador, Mr. Councillor, Mr. Director of Digital City. It's a real pleasure for me to have this opportunity to chair the first roundtable of our event called What are future opportunities for the future of AI? And I wanted to start by talking about something positive. Mr. Ambassador just described it. We're in an international context that is actually more likely to make us very pessimistic. So I wanted to start with an optimistic news, which was announced 48 hours ago. Intel said that they would invest $36 billion in the production of semiconductors. The European Commissioner just said it. And so we had a look at what those $36 billion were made up of. There is some funds for productions with production capacities in Germany, Ireland, and potentially Italy. But there's also a whole a package about research with the creation of a hub. There was an article in the Washington Post, so a European R&D hub near the Plateau de Saclay in France. So keeping that in mind, I really had three questions for you. The first of which is, or has to do rather, with artificial intelligence. Are we not progressing towards a new type of AI? Julia was telling us that there's not just one AI, there are several types of AI, and this new type of AI might be less centralized in the way that it operates and uses data, which is good because users are becoming more and more aware of the fact that they need to protect their data. This AI may also be less energy consuming and would evolve compared to that system of data centers. We heard that 66% of energy consumption now is used to cool down those data centers, and artificial intelligence, this new type of AI, would be less dependent on cloud computing and would make it possible to have more embarked AI. So with those different characteristics, would you say that Europe, or could Europe not give itself a new leading role, or at least have, opportunities to catch up? So that would be my first question. I know it's a very broad question, but yeah, I wanted to maybe ask Mr. Vedel first, Renaud Vedel, who I have not who've not introduced yet, but he is the head of the National AI Acceleration Strategy in France. There are definitely going to be many opportunities. The AI sciences, or the components of AI, IT, maths, applied sciences, we've made huge progress, great strides over the past decade. And we will for sure be seeing new opportunities to seize. It doesn't mean that Europe has comparative advantages, because there is extremely dense international competition. Geopolitically, AI is the theme that China decided to challenge the US on. There was a plan adopted by the Chinese Council of State. They really want to be at the very top in 2030. They want supremacy. We will see by then what happens, but you have to recognize that in terms of research, production and application, China has caught up on Europe and even is now ahead of us. So there is a big challenge there. You were right to highlight the fact that we're going to move towards AI. Technologically, it's a bit complicated, but it's going to be more and more distributed with Internet of Things, with 5G and so on and so forth, which enables it. And I think, yes, when you think about the components, you can indeed save energy. But if all of our objects are connected, and we know that consumption is also related to electronic components, I'm not quite sure that this will be a very green decision. So we will have to decide where AI is necessary, where connection is necessary, because this might not be sustainable from an ecological perspective. Data centers consume a lot of energy, it's true. What consumes a lot of energy, in fact, and some people are better to talk about that, is to calculate permanently. So calculating locally helps you save energy, but you have to choose that very, very specifically. But yes, there are many opportunities to seize. We have a lot of talents in France, in Europe. We have a capital as well, but you have to be you know, you have to be, you can't be naive. There are things that are missing. We don't have a unified digital market. It's very important to throw bridges between neighboring countries. We have to pool our resources, pool our strengths, and work hand in hand internationally. I'm not just talking about Belgium and France, but also the Netherlands, Germany, Italy, and so on and so forth. I don't want to go on and on, but when you have a look at our strengths, there are good things. We have you know, big projects with French scientists. We have SML in the Netherlands, with the world champion. We have Nokia Ericsson in the Nordic countries. We have really, and these are only the big names, right? But there are also a lot of startup ecosystems that have made progress with +2, +3 in terms of investment, but the GAFAMs also invested 290 billion in parallel during the same time. So you have to focus on those technologies, because what is AI? AI is a new way of dealing with information, to get information from it, encoded through data. We are not quite where we would like to be, I believe, in terms of how we promote our data and how we use them and how we optimize them. There are texts that are interesting at the Commission at the moment, and they will make it possible for us to progress. But it's also about building more autonomous physical and digital systems that can make their own decisions. We also need to be bold from an entrepreneurship perspective. I'd like to get back to what you were saying about how necessary it is to have more unified digital market, and Nathanaël is not he's responsible for AI4Belgium. He's at the head of AI4Belgium, and he's also working in several international organizations, including European organizations. What can you tell us about the efforts currently being made to unify the digital market? I know there are efforts made in terms of training, contact between different ecosystems. I believe it is the very goal and the very spirit of the European coordinated plan. So what we are doing at the moment, as Renaud said, is exactly in that spirit. It's exactly going in this direction. In 2017, France gave itself a head start. They said it was important to consolidate that plan, to you know, to create coalitions, and there are coalitions that are being built in each countries. We need to identify our strengths, our weaknesses. The ambition was always to collaborate between each other, and this is exactly what's happening at the moment. So the ecosystems know each other better, are structured better, and we are indeed creating bridges through several initiatives, like the one today, through the global partnership that was started with Canada and France as well at a more global level. But absolutely, we must work at EU level. We must work on our storytelling as well. What is the meaning of this project? How can we breathe new life into the European project with environmental ambitions, ambitions relating to health, ambitions relating also to the co-creation of tomorrow's world? Those are big words, I know, but it's also very important. We are going through a big crisis, as Mr. Ambassador said, and we have to focus on that. I also wanted to highlight, I wanted to do it as an introduction, but I was somehow too flattered by everybody else, and I didn't dare, but I wanted to also highlight the very strong and very professional commitment of the French embassy and of the whole ecosystem in Belgium. They really worked very hard on the organization of today's Congress, and I think it all goes through people, right? And the history of AI is based on basic questions like where do we come from and so on and so forth, but artificial intelligence also fundamentally asks us what a human being is and what our values are. So we are working on those European values. These technological evolutions force us to question what we may have considered obvious, what we may have taken for granted, and to rethink how we live together. Again, big words, but it was mentioned yesterday as well. Engineers may maybe take a couple of philosophy lessons as well, and think about that from a more basic perspective. You know, from Leonardo da Vinci to today, we really have to get out of the darkness that threatens to catch up with us again these days. Okay, let's get back to the importance of the human factor. Let's get back to talents and how necessary talents are. I would like to again echo yesterday's discussion where we had a French scientist who is based in the US, and he therefore knows and has a good overview of the ecosystem there. And he explained that in the Silicon Valley, we have 70% of non-US Americans working there, including European citizens. How can Europe better discuss or talk to young people? I could have done a bit of self-promotion as well, because Nathanaël is also a member of the steering committee of TRAIL. TRAIL is made up of 5 French-speaking universities and 4 research institutes that decided to work hand in hand in the field of IA. So what can we tell new talents, young people, so that they remain in Europe or so that they come back to Europe? First and foremost, we need more talents. We need to be even more focused on the fact that society is now digital, or the digital component of our society is more and more important. It's not just that. A society is a lot more, you know, many more things, but the digital world is very important. I'm part of a generation where I was not taught IT at school at all. Not at all. And even now in university and schools and so on and so forth, not everybody gets computer information or computer training. There are other countries, especially in the east of Europe, Asian countries, that decided to have to really integrate the digital element into education, and we must do that as well. We need more talents. We have a lot of talents as well. We have a lot more people with diplomas. We've created 190 professors' positions. We have a lot of PhDs. But when you're young, when you have talent, what you want is you want to have access to the best data. You want to work with the best in the best and most stimulating environment. So we must build public and private institutions that give those young people a future. It's the meaning of the startup movement. There is an entrepreneurship spirit. Young people in engineering schools, in business schools, they want to create their own startups. They used to want to work in a bank or in insurances and so on and so forth, but and those are important companies, but they now want to create startups. So you need to be able to unlock finances and create projects. In Europe, we notice quite often that we're not yet agile enough to implement some of our regulations. If you want to work in health, in education, with AI, you need access to data that are often personal data, which means you need to read GDPR and you need to determine how to access the data. AI, the very idea is to depersonalize data. And I'm not sure that this is always done very agile, in a very agile way, with a regulation that evolves with its time. Same with other projects. We have set ourselves very ambitious goals. We will have to make sure that we have the right balance between our ambition to have controllable, auditable systems with methods that do not yet exist, which is extremely bold. No one else in the world decided to do that choice of horizontal general implementation. But we will also need schemes to preserve innovation, because 4 years ago, we spoke only of supervised AI. Now we speak of genericity. Maybe 2 years from now, we will have made progress on the reinforcement learning. So we need to have texts that we can proofread, keeping technologies in mind. We can't have separate tracks between tech and legal, otherwise innovation will be blocked. And this is a state of mind that is very important. We must make sure that the legal framework in Europe encourages innovation.
We were talking about young talents. Don't you think that we need to convey the following message and say it's very good to be engineers, but I think that we also need to enhance the ethical dimension. Yesterday, we were saying that Leonardo da Vinci had a very global approach and a multidisciplinary approach. Now, of course, Da Vinci was a genius, but since our young people are ambitious, I think that we need to tell them how important it is to have a global view. And we should also avoid any regulation that would limit our capacity to be creative. Now, of course, in the long term, we also need to think about data protection. And I think that we shouldn't neglect data protection. It's not so much of a question, but more of a comment. Yes, I think that we need to convey this message to future engineers. They will have an impact on our world. They need to be open. They need to have a global view on things. This is, well, AI is a cross-cutting and multidisciplinary field. We talk about ethic by design. We talk about involving citizens in the debate. Then I think that policymakers also need to understand the challenges of AI, of blockchain, of the various technological fields. And I think that, yes, we also need to make sure that policymakers better understand these technologies ahead of making new legislation. Now, of course, sometimes the frame and the structures are too rigid and do not evolve quick enough. Now, I talked with colleagues in Paris about to which extent things evolve. They evolve very fast, and unfortunately, the policy making and the decision making process is always lagging behind this fast evolution of technologies. Now, of course, there are ethical, legal values. We need to comply with human dignity. Right from the beginning of design, we need to include an in-depth reflection. We cannot do everything. We need, of course, profiles that can act as bridge between disciplines, and we need multidisciplinary team. We need a legal expert, data protection experts, etc. And I think that the Commission has been a pioneer in the work it has made with the group. And I think that the European project is very interesting, but we need to look at it exhaustively. And the details sometimes are less perfect than the coverage. Well, now regarding the comments you made about Trail, I am part of Trail, and Isabel also accepted being part of the steering committee of Trail. So we will be able to strengthen the cooperation thanks to her. And I think that IMEC and the CEA will hold the debate later on. The CEA is very strong in France. Now, there are many things that our European Commissioner has said and on which we work on. I am a big fan of storytelling, of making sense and building sense. If we are to build the European project, of course, we will need those $290 billion grant. We will need the European investments in the following years, and these investments are growing, as we saw yesterday. But if we look at investments in IA within the previous program, Horizon 2020, I think that the whole program was quite ambitious. So as far as investments are concerned, well, the amount is impressive. Now, when it comes to cohesion and cooperation, I think that there are some people who are more skeptical than others, and new generations, you know, are quite special. They have a very short timing. I used to teach at university, and each year I noted that generations had higher expectations, and they also have expectations in terms of environment issues. Now, we are approaching the conclusions of this first roundtable. What advice would you give to those new generations that are involved in the AI transformation or about to be involved in this transformation? What kind of advice would you give? Now, I think AI is about a noble scientific quest. It is about creating know-how, but it is also a general use type of technology, as we call it. So I would say, do what you like. Are you interested in knowledge quest or in tangible application, practical application? So be involved. And I think there are many ways that AI can be used to make services more customized, or to move towards a more circular economy. AI has so many applications that I think it can appeal to many profiles. So go for it. That's the advice I would give. What about you, Nathanaël? Now, of course, Renaud is so good that I have to try and be better or as good. Now, I don't want to repeat what has been said, but I would advise breaking the silos that exist between sectors here in Europe. There is, of course, national fragmentation, the public, the private sector, the academics, the citizens are way too separated from one another. So I'd like to urge the new generations to do what they like, to do what drives them. And I think that in universities, though it might sound as a caricature, we always tend to say that businesses are the devil, are driven by money and profits exclusively. But, you know, having a business mindset, wanting to do practical things, accepting to make mistakes and to start from scratch, I think that businesses also carry a positive message for researchers and universities. And I think that the results are quite striking when you go to MIT or Stanford. The dean always gives and always make a presentation about the impact of these universities on the real world. So I think that we need to promote the business values, and we need to dismantle and break, tear apart some stereotypes that we have, and have a positive vision about businesses. So AI will have practical implications on many fields, and as stakeholders of the AI, you will, I think, mark our future world in your own way. Thank you very much. in your own way. Thank you very much.